Thank you, Elizabeth, for that brief introduction. And thank you all for hosting me tonight. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And if not, Elizabeth can start screaming at me that you guys can't.
Sound great.
Great. As Elizabeth said, my name is Tom Visco. I am the Community and Partnerships Manager at the Permanent Legacy Foundation. Just since everyone else was saying where they're from, I am coming to you all from Austin, Texas. And I am an Air Force brat. So I was born in Nebraska and lived all over the country. And we'll talk about a little bit about where I come from this evening. So what we're here to talk about tonight is the Permanent Legacy Foundation, permanent.org. Permanent is a 501c3 nonprofit. And really, at the end of the day, Permanent is a fun combination between a traditional mission-driven nonprofit and a tech startup. Our mission is to preserve and provide perpetual access to the digital legacy of all peoples for the historical and educational benefit of future generations. And the way that we are accomplishing that mission is by building a preservation-minded technology platform that, although has a mission underneath it, should seem very familiar to a lot of folks who use things like Dropbox or Google Drive or what have you. But it's the mission that really sets us apart from those other services. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here at the beginning talking briefly about what that mission is and where it comes from. At the end of the day, everyone has a legacy that deserves to be preserved. And for a lot of you all who are genealogy or family history enthusiasts, a lot of the materials that come to us to preserve that legacy, they might be old photographs, old papers, journals, what have you. And over the past 20 or 30 years, the production of that type of physical ephemera has declined significantly with the advent of the internet, right? So much more of our lives are happening in a digital space, and digital ephemera is far easy to get lost than the physical ephemera that has come down to us from our ancestors. Your laptop's hard drive gets corrupted, you lose that USB stick that your sister gave you at a family reunion. Many of us have probably experienced things like this. So Permanent is trying to find a solution to that problem. That problem is often referred to in academia as the digital dark ages. And I think for anyone who cares about family history, we know that individual stories can change the way we see the world. I mentioned that I'm an Air Force brat, grew up living on Air Force bases across the country. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the flight crews that my father flew with during the Cold War, and the 20 or 30 people who were on planes with him. And each one of those individuals has a unique individual story, a unique history that brought them to that place serving our country. And there's a lot that's been lost because we're not actively preserving those memories, those stories, and those legacies. And traditionally, it's people who are powerful and extremely fortunate in their lives who get remembered, right? We know a lot more about the pharaohs who built the pyramids than the laborers and slaves who actually literally built the pyramids, right? And there's something to that. And there's something tragic about that too. As time goes on, we lose out on a lot of what can contextualize history, not only like big picture capital H history, but also the tiny h history of our individual families and where we're coming from. So we want to fix that. And what we want to try to do is democratize the idea of being remembered. There's only a few of us who are lucky enough to have a trunk that was left behind by elders for us to mine important information about where we're coming from. We need a new way to do that, and we need a way that fits the digital age that we're in. And so that's what we're building. We are using tried and true methods, things like endowment, to build a sustainable organization that can build a digital platform to create this new paradigm whereby everyone has the opportunity, and an easy opportunity at that, to preserve their legacy for those who are coming after them. So what, that was a lot of like pie in the sky theory, right? What are we actually talking about? What we're talking about is a digital cloud storage platform, very similar to, if you've used Dropbox or Google Drive before, very similar to that. It's private first and it's public second, which means that ultimately the folks who are using permanent.org have full control over what's happening to the materials that they are uploading to that platform. I mentioned that we're a nonprofit, and our business model as a nonprofit uses an endowment model that some of you may be familiar with from museums and universities. We're creating a user interface that is very similar to ones that you've encountered, again, if you've used Dropbox or Google Drive. But because we're preservation minded, we're implementing a lot of features that those types of platforms don't have, like metadata importing, full metadata editing, and metadata exporting. If you change the metadata on files that are uploaded to permanent and then download them to move them somewhere else, that metadata is going to follow them. And our metadata standards that we're using, we are designing the platform with the aspiration of hitting true archival best practice with how we manage those, things like tags and things like that. And then finally, our mission is not just to preserve the legacy, but it's also to help folks make that legacy accessible. So we have a lot of tools and features that I'll get into later that make it very easy to share the materials that you want to share, keeping private the materials that you want to keep private, and really empowering people to pass on a true legacy. One thing that we talk about a lot is, imagine not only sort of inheriting that trunk full of photos and family documents, but also inheriting with that a guide to everything that is in that trunk, written by the person who put that trunk together. And not all of us are that lucky, unfortunately, but Permanent is trying to fix that. And so there's a lot of applications for this at the end of the day, and we'll talk about a couple of those applications. Obviously, for someone who is family history or genealogy minded, it forces you to think about things on a generational scale. And we're trying to build a platform that can work on a generational scale. But we also work with lots of other folks besides genealogists, enthusiasts, or family historians. We work with historians and archivists who are looking for a digital asset management system that is accessible to a lot of people, that doesn't require special training, but still has a lot of the features that professional archivists are looking for. We also work a lot with families who are doing big family oral history projects and are looking for a central place to store those oral histories and then share them out with other folks. And then finally, I know that this is genealogy focused, but it should be said, because we're a nonprofit, our business model is not the mining or monetization of our users or their data. So we also have a lot of people who use Permanent because they're worried about their privacy and are looking for a cloud storage solution that is more privacy respecting than a lot of other folks who are currently on the market. I mentioned a couple of these features already, but I'm just going to go through them quickly, and then I'm really looking forward to some Q&A. We have sharing features on Permanent that will be very familiar to anyone who has ever shared something on Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive. Not only can you share with individuals using their email address and send them a link to Permanent, we also give a lot of different levels of permissions, right? Traditional sharing on a digital platform like this might be, this person can view a document, this person can edit the document. We have many more sharing features that allow people to not only be viewers, but curators and editors and what have you. And all of these different levels give you different permissions. And because we're preservation minded, we really protect the permission to actually make changes to the file. So we give folks a lot of leeway to decide who should be able to edit metadata, who shouldn't be. And ultimately, who should be the owner of this piece of material, because that person has the sole ability to delete that material. We take, obviously, deletions very seriously as a preservation-minded platform. I already mentioned metadata, but it's really important, and we can't, I think, talk about it enough. We support, you can upload any file to Permanent. Obviously, there are very, very old file formats that we aspire to be able to support, but can't at the moment. but we do read metadata from all supported file formats. And again, we give you the ability to edit the metadata of any file. And this is something that sets us apart from a lot of other folks. While you might be able to change the metadata of a photo or something like that in another platform, you can even edit the metadata of the folders that those photos are in on permanent, and that's important for us. And then tags are super important, especially when we're talking about managing, thousands of photos and documents. Tags are searchable across an archive, across your account. And we're also slowly implementing true archival tagging, starting with the Dublin Core standard. I've been saying archives a couple of times, but that's what we refer to as sort of your actual account where things go. Your account is sort of tied to your email address. When you create an account, you also create your first archive, but you can have an infinite number of archives with one account. So, maybe you're the only family historian in your family and you're managing both sides of the family and multiple lines all the way up the tree. And permanent gives you the ability to create an individual archive to better organize all of that material that you might have from different people. And finally, public archives are a really cool feature. I mentioned that we want to be able to share the legacy that people are leaving behind. And essentially what a public archive is very similar to a social media profile, but you can, when you're in your archive, you have all of your different files, they're all organized, you have descriptions for all of them. You can choose which of those files go into your public archive. And your public archive is a static URL that you are then able to share openly on the internet. You can text it with your family and friends so that they can have access to those materials. You can host it on a family website or post it to a Facebook page for a family reunion. It's a very easy way to share the materials that you've worked really hard to preserve. And finally, we have modern conveniences like being available on many different types of devices. We recently released an iOS and Android app, so now you can have permanent on your phone, which allows you in real time, if you're taking photos at an event, you can instantly upload those files to your permanent archive, so you don't have to worry about plugging in your phone after an event and taking the photos off of it and what have you. And then you can also do full metadata editing directly from your phone, obviously, which is convenient if you're like me and you don't like to talk at family reunions and try to distract yourself with something else. So a couple other important features of permanent that keeps us very consumer minded and consumer focused. No subscriptions to be a part of the Permanent Legacy Foundation. I mentioned that we are a nonprofit. A $10 donation to permanent gets you 1 gigabyte. And I say donation because that's important. $10 per gigabyte, and that $10 is tax deductible because by getting a gigabyte and using that gigabyte on permanent, you are helping us achieve our nonprofit mission to preserve all of our legacies. We also follow best practices in terms of digital preservation. We save all the files that are uploaded to permanent to multiple cloud providers. We're not just on one cloud provider. We're making copies of all of those files. We're saving them to different clouds in different parts of the world to keep them safe. I mentioned a little bit the people that we work with. We work with a lot of folks that y'all may be familiar with. Family Search is one that obviously is a big one. We have a Family Search integration that makes it very easy to import your family tree from Family Search into permanent. We also work with Their Story, which is it's another startup very similar to us in sort of their phase of development, but they are a oral history platform that is excellent. Y'all should look at them if you are ever interested in making oral history. We also have a partnership with the Internet Archive, and any file that you upload to permanent, you can push directly to the Internet Archive from permanent. We also work with a lot of nonprofit partners and clients who use our services in a professional environment to do professional preservation. These are just some of the museums. A recent one that we just entered into partnership with that I'm very excited about is the Women Military Aviators Archive, which is gathering stories and oral histories and materials from it seems like pretty close to every female aviator that the United States Air Force and Army have had. So it's a very cool project for us and fun to be a part of. Um, Very quickly, just sort of how the endowment model works. Very similar to any other endowment model that you might see at a university. Over time, storage expense is declining, endowment returns are increasing, and eventually we will reach a point where we are able to be a perpetually sustainable organization because of our endowment. And that's going to allow us to do the maintenance that is necessary to keep those files safe and secure and make sure our members have full control of them, which is the achievement of our nonprofit mission. Very quickly, final thing, a couple of things that we are working on. Like any tech platform, we are continuously improving our usability. I mentioned my title is community and partnerships, and a big piece of that community is getting feedback from our most active users. That's a big part of what I do. We have folks who use our platform a lot. They have a lot to say about it, a lot of changes that they would like to see made, and we are here for that. And we're in active discussions with our members about how to make the platform better. Another thing that's on the horizon for us is directives. So, how do you pass on your account, right? I mentioned sort of the trunk that some of us have inherited, but for us, the real opportunity of this is, passing on a digital archive that you yourself have sort of written the guide to. I mean, I have a lot of old videos from my grandfather and great grandfather, and a lot of the context of those videos is totally lost, and we'll never get it again. And to me, something like this really solves that problem, right? You have an account, you're able to pass it on to those who are following behind you and giving them the full picture of what's in that account. We're also working on a public API, which is technobabble speak for, we're gonna make it easier for other folks to tie into Permanent and use us as storage, right? So maybe you have some photo management app or that you like to use, or some other way that you work with your digital materials in a family history context. We are working on the infrastructure to make it easier for those other apps and services to tie into Permanent. And finally, we are actively working on open sourcing our code base that powers Permanent. For those of you who don't know, open source essentially means that all of the code that runs Permanent on our servers is open to the public. And a lot of our code is already open source. You can go to our GitHub page and look at the code that powers Permanent, and we are working to be fully open source here in the near future. So that is all that I have. I'm certainly happy to keep filling up time, but I would love to see if anyone has any questions or places that we would like to take the conversation. Thank you guys so much for listening.